the formation of new kana written horizontally. Shinsekai Type Study Group 2012. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Shinsekai Type Study Group, today I would like to talk about the Japanese writing system, specifically about the kana script. My discussion will focus on the realm of possibility. Written Japanese is one of the world's most complex languages. It's written using a combination of three different systems, kanji characters, and two scripts known as hiragana and katakana. Originally, however, hiragana and katakana both derived from kanji. Kanji characters originated in China, where they each have their own meaning. Early on, they were imported into Japan, where the existing language was completely different. To express Japanese, Chinese characters had to be adapted. Two new scripts were invented, based on kanji, known as hiragana and katakana. Today I will limit my discussion to hiragana, which I will refer to simply as kana. I will start by describing how kana came about. At first, in around the 7th century, kanji were used phonetically. In other words, kanji were used simply to express the sounds of Japanese, one character per sound. Around the 9th or 10th century, the forms of kanji began undergoing gradual change. A new style developed, a more fluid or cursive style unique to Japan. This is called sagana. During the 10th to 11th centuries, sagana's forms became even more fluid and refined. The result is the writing system that came to be known as kana. In this way, whereas at first kanji were used in Japan in their original form, gradually their shapes became increasingly cursive, until eventually they became kana unique to Japan. The kana we use today are almost identical to those that developed 1,000 years ago. Now let's see how kana took the forms they did. Originally, Japanese was always written vertically, in other words, from top to bottom. When one line was completed, the next line was started to its left. As kana became progressively fluid, characters came to be linked, or almost linked, vertically. As an example, here, in the middle, we see the kana, no. The first stroke in, no, takes up where the last stroke of the preceding kana ends. In the same way, the last stroke in, no, connects into the first stroke of the next kana. What we see here is the flowing movement of the writing brush, with each kana connecting to the one below it. Here we see how the writing brush moves when kanji are written. What we find is a zigzag pattern, like a chain of interconnecting letter Z. But as kanji became increasingly cursive, the brush movements become interconnecting spirals, as we see here. In this way, with increased fluidity and greater connectivity, kanji gradually took new forms, kana. So far, everything I've talked about is history. Today, under the influence of the Roman alphabet, which entered Japan along with Western culture, writing horizontally has become altogether common in Japan. And as you see, today we Japanese are even able to speak English. Today in fact, most things are written horizontally, our websites, our corporate materials, even official documents. But the words used in these places, Japanese writing, weren't intended to be aligned horizontally. This is true of kanji, of course. And the same holds true of kana, with their basically vertical strokes. Here then, let's consider how kana might have looked if they had been derived from horizontal rather than vertical strokes. Of course, we are only talking about possibilities here, so there is no correct answer. After all, what we do today is merely to lay out, horizontally, kana that developed vertically. But such thinking will get us nowhere in our investigation, so let's just continue. What might have happened, though, if Just if the culture of writing horizontally had entered Japan earlier, before the development of kana, let's see what kana might have come to look like in that instance. For example, what might have happened if Japanese had been written horizontally at the time sagana developed, around the 11th century? How would kana have looked if they had been connected horizontally? Or, if they had been written from right to left? A number of possibilities come to mind. Here, we will look into 3 such possibilities, and see how kana might have evolved. First, let's consider case 1. Horizontal sagana. In the course of changing from kanji to the more cursive sagana, when written vertically, the kanji shown here at the top, pronounced a, became the sagana shown here in the middle. But if the same kanji a had been written horizontally, this, in the middle of the top row, is what its sagana form might have looked like. Here we see how some other kanji might have developed their sagana forms if they had been written horizontally. If Japanese characters had been written horizontally instead of vertically, this would have affected their starting and finishing points. And the choice of writing brush, too. Compare the sagana forms when the same kanji is written vertically and horizontally. This is wu. This is a. This is o. This is a prototype sagana script that might have evolved if kanji had been written horizontally instead of vertically. Let's call it horizontal sagana. We can clearly see the difference between kana written vertically and kana written horizontally. Here is how it would look in actual usage. What this is the horizontal sagana version of the vertical text we saw earlier. This is the longer version. Here it is again. Now let's consider case 2. Horizontal kana script. Here, I would like to consider how kana might have developed if they had been written with strokes having stronger horizontal links to the characters to their left and right. Here again is our chart of horizontal sagana, this time, showing the Z-shaped pattern of movements between the individual characters. If these characters were connected by the natural flow of a writing brush moving in the horizontal direction, what would the resulting kana look like? In the first stage, they might look like this. Each character has become increasingly cursive. If we take this one step further, increasing the fluid horizontal flow between the characters, we find the writing tends to drift downward as it proceeds to the right. Now, I would like to examine the strokes involved when writing the Roman alphabet, which is a horizontal system. The stroke movement here resembles a series of connected letter N. The writing zigzags in the perpendicular direction as it moves horizontally to the right. In cursive script, stroke movements form spirals in the shape of the letter E or M. As we saw earlier, vertically written kana derived from kanji having Z-shaped strokes. What happens when, instead of Z, kana are written horizontally, with movements resembling the letter N, as with the alphabet? Let's see. By moving the Z pattern somewhat in a counterclockwise direction, gradually shifting from a vertical orientation to a horizontal one, until we have what looks like a chain of N. If we now insert some kanji, their interconnections can be visualized. Now let's look more closely at the classical text, in vertical kana, that I showed you earlier. We discover that its rows aren't completely vertical. Rather, they seem to drift gradually to the right as the text proceeds downward. This may be because the writer wrote with the right hand, or because horizontal strokes in reality tend to tilt upward and to the right. In this respect, there is nothing unnatural about writing that drifts to the right as it proceeds downward. Now let's take our horizontal kana and tilt it in the counterclockwise direction. The connections between the kana become smoother. The horizontal kana, seen here in their original orientation, seem to flow more naturally when tilted. The result is what we might call horizontal kana script. Here is what our horizontal kana would look like with even further smoothing out and a little bit more. Here, we can clearly see the difference between kana written vertically and kana written horizontally. This is how our horizontal kana script looks as blocks of words. And here is the same text, only this time, the kana of each word are connected even more cursively. Case 3. Right to left. Now, I would like to consider a third possibility, if Japanese had been written from right to left. Here we see a sample of an actual old Japanese text written horizontally from right to left. So, the ancients did write from right to left after all. Some of you may think. But what we actually have here are characters written vertically. But just one character per line. It's conceivable, though, that this could have led to writing horizontally. So, what would kana look like if brush strokes had started at the right and continued leftward? Now, as a quick review, when Japanese is written vertically, movements are downward as the brush zigzags left and right. Like the letter Z. When characters are written from right to left, the Z strokes would most likely become horizontally inverted. Like this. And if the characters were connected, like this, we can expect the strokes to zigzag in the vertical direction. Here we see a sample of what kana might look like if Japanese was written from right to left. Here again, we can compare the difference between kana written vertically and kana written horizontally. Here is Hyaku Nenishu poem cards written in vertical text. This is how the text would turn out when written horizontally. Okay, what we have seen are 3 possible cases. Of course, many other possibilities are conceivable, and surely there is no one correct answer. I think that looking back at possible factors that influence the formation of the kana we use today, and considering other possibilities, provides us with a good opportunity, the opportunity to take a second look at our modern kana and make new discoveries. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your kind attention.